Welcome, everyone. My name is Audrey Kitagawa. I'm the chair of the Parliament of the World's Religions. Today, we are having this commemorative broadcast on June 26, the International Day for the Conservation of Tropical Forests. This commemoration will highlight the important work of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, for which each of our presenters have made major contributions. We hope that this program will touch, move, and inspire you to get involved in helping to protect and restore our rainforests and the indigenous peoples who serve as their guardians. Our presenters are Dr. Jane Goodall, a world-renowned primatologist who spent years in the Gombe Stream National Park in Tanzania, which has high levels of biodiversity. She has been a powerful advocate for the preservation of these natural habitats of chimpanzees and the environment. Dr. Charles McNeil serves as the Senior Advisor on Forests and Climate for the United Nations Environment Program, where he oversees the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative and Forest and Climate Policy. Ms. Victoria Tauli Corpuz is an indigenous leader from the Kankanaey Igorot people of the Cordillera region in the Philippines. She is a member of the Global Steering Committee of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. Now, let us enter into the world of the rainforests.
Rainforests, ecological marvels, millions of years in the making. Rainforests provide water, food, and livelihoods for billions of people around the world. They contain a staggering diversity of life. They create the oxygen we breathe and regulate our climate. They are our life support system. But rainforests are at grave risk. Every second of every day, an irreplaceable rainforest the size of a football field is destroyed. Powerful economic and political interests are driving their destruction to produce beef, palm oil, and paper, wiping out countless species from existence, marginalizing the poor and deepening inequality, threatening the survival of indigenous communities, and destroying the best solution for climate change that we have. But there is still hope, where a different future awaits us, where faith unites us to make rainforests a shared spiritual priority, where we teach our communities that rainforests are a sacred trust, where we feed a growing planet without converting rainforests, where we work with companies to ensure their products are deforestation-free, and where we make sure that governments protect forests and the rights of indigenous peoples. This is the future where we do what is right. But we need to come together, affirm that protecting rainforests is a moral responsibility for all people of faith, mobilize a movement built on the values we share across our religions and spiritual traditions, stewardship of the earth and care for creation, a respect for human rights and human dignity, social and economic justice. The Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is doing just that. From the Amazon to the Congo Basin to the forests of Southeast Asia, rallying faith communities to act. We must end deforestation because her life depends on it. His life depends on it. Their future depends on it. We all depend on it. Hello, this is Jane Goodall. And first of all, I want to thank you, Audrey, so very much for inviting me to take part in the International Day for the Conservation of Tropical Forests, something which is very dear to my heart. For me, forests have always been the most special places on the planet, and how lucky I was, because I went out to Gombe National Park in Tanzania in 1960, and not only could I spend days, weeks, months learning about the amazing people of the forest, the chimpanzees, but also spending hours and hours, days alone in a rainforest, understanding the interconnection of all living things, how each little species, no matter how small it seems, has a role to play in this magical tapestry of life. And if one species disappears, this can lead to total ecosystem collapse. The magic of the forest for me is partly in the sounds, and let me bring my favorite forest sounds into this gathering, the greeting of the chimpanzee. But the sounds of the forest will be different in different countries, in different parts of a country, depending on the species that inhabit it. So there are the songs of the gibbons, the trumpeting of an elephant, the strange long call of the orangutan, the chattering of monkeys, the croaking of frogs at night, and the chirping of crickets and the whirring of cicadas. And there's the sound of the wind in the leaves. And sometimes when there's a storm, the roaring and the crackling of lightning. These sounds make up part of the magic of the forest. And tragically, as we destroy the forests, so we lose the voices of the forest. It gets quieter and quieter. You know, we need these forests. I think everybody listening knows that. They absorb carbon dioxide, they breathe out oxygen, and we desperately need them today to help mitigate climate change. And yet, despite all of this, despite our need for the forest, we're destroying them. We're destroying them so fast. And it's not just harming the forest and the creatures of the forest, it's harming the planet and the temperature of the planet, and it's harming us. Millions of people, poor people, indigenous people, depend on the forests for their livelihood. What can we do? How can we save the forests? Is there time? Can we save them before it's too late? This pandemic, it's keeping us apart. I should have been with you today, but I'm locked down in Bournemouth in England. Others of you will still be locked down, or will be social distancing or something. We brought this pandemic on ourselves, and it's because we disrespected the forest, disrespected the natural world, disrespected animals. And I'm told that most of the brand new diseases that afflict human beings come originally from animals. They're called zoonotic diseases, and the number of them seems to be rising. I say it's because we disrespect the environment. Let's say we cut down a rainforest, or we cut it smaller and smaller. This forces various animal species in closer contact than they would normally be, and this can lead to a spillover of a bacteria or a virus from an animal to another animal. That can create a new disease. These animals are sometimes pushed into closer contact with people, as in crop raiding, or when hunters go into the forest and hunt them, shoot them, and cut up their bodies. And this too provides a fantastic environment for these pathogens to spill over from animals to people. And then we traffic them. We hunt them, kill them, shoot them, eat them, and send them off in tiny crates to travel around the world, often in very unhygienic conditions. And there, where both the seller and the buyer can be contaminated with the blood, urine, feces, because often the animals there are killed on the spot. And that again can lead to one of these bacteria or viruses spilling over from one animal to one person. And sometimes that can bond with a cell in the human body and create a new disease which may be contagious. This pandemic, this new coronavirus, and it's incredibly contagious. So it starts with one person, and in no time at all it's gone around the world. It's created chaos, and it's our fault. We brought it on ourselves. Imagine the next one, and there will be a next one if we don't pay attention. Imagine the next one, which is just as contagious, but has a higher rate of deaths per infection. But supposing a new one is formed, what's going to happen then? Are we going to listen? So, where is the hope today for rainforests and for us? Well, there's a big hope that awareness has grown among the general public around the world about the fact that it is our disrespect of the environment that's caused this pandemic and will definitely cause others if we don't do more to respect nature. And by the way, we've horribly disrespected the indigenous people, the guardians of the forest, with their ancient knowledge of the forest, with their knowledge of the medicinal plants. There's so many plants that heal out in the forest, and we're destroying forests before we've even tested many of them. So, as I say, there's some hope in that people may have a greater understanding after this pandemic. But there's other hope in the resilience of nature. And the example I'm most familiar with, and others of you will know other examples, but when I got to Gombe in 1960, it was part of this great equatorial forest belt that stretched right across from Western East Africa to the West African coast. And it was pretty well intact, that great forest, until the 80s. But when I flew over it in 1990 in a small plane, I knew there was deforestation. But I wasn't prepared to look down and see the Gombe National Park, which is tiny, and as I say, had been part of a great forest. I looked down on a tiny island of forest surrounded by completely bare hills, more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere, cutting down the last trees, knowing that there'd be erosion, knowing the streams would silt up, knowing the land would become gradually drier, but cutting them down in their desperate effort to grow more food because their own land was over-farmed and infertile. And so that's when it hit me. If we don't try and help these people find ways of making a livelihood without destroying the forest, without destroying their environment, we can't even try to save the chimps and the remaining rainforest. And so the Jane Goodall Institute began our program, Take Care or Takari, which is a very holistic program. It's improving the lives of the people in many, many different ways. And as they came to trust us, we could introduce new technology. And today, the people in all of the villages throughout Chimp Range in Western Tanzania, they have become our partners. They are monitoring the health of their forest. They're proud of what they do. They've learned to use smartphones. They upload the data that they've collected into platforms in the clouds. If you fly over Gombe today, that's from 1990 until today, you won't see bare hills. The trees have come back. Chimpanzees have more forest. The people have put buffers around the chimpanzee areas to protect people from chimps and chimps from people. And this is really important because most of Tanzania's chimps don't live in protected forests, they live out in the village forest reserves. This program is now in 6 other African countries. And as I say, there are other places where the forest has been regenerated. Maybe it won't be quite the same as it was before, but it will be supporting life, and gradually biodiversity will return. And now we can save species and reintroduce them once the habitat is safe. And so hope lies in the resilience of nature. Hope lies in the will of the people. Hope lies in the young people, because young people are beginning to understand. Young people understand that the forests are one of the lungs of the world. The forests need protecting. The indigenous people are fighting for ownership of their land. And together, if we do get together as we come out of this pandemic and fight for a new green economy and stop thinking that there can be unlimited economic development on a planet with finite natural resources, because it doesn't make sense. And if we can truly get together, people who've smelt clean air, breathed clean air, maybe for the first time in their lives in the big cities, they won't want to go back to the old polluted ways. People who've seen stars shining in the night sky, bright, maybe for the first time, they won't want to go back to the old polluted ways. And this means that we have to address climate change much more vigorously than we have. If only we could address climate change the way governments have addressed the pandemic and done so much to curtail the pandemic. If only. And that's what I hope for the future. And maybe during these days, some new ideas can emerge, some new determination. And as I say, if we all get together, we can save the forest, but we don't have much time. We have to take action, and we have to take action now. So, thank you.
I'm Vicky Tauli Corpus. I am the UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and I am an indigenous person, a Kankanai Igorot from the Cordillera region in the Philippines. I'm born in a forest area. That's where my community is, and so it's very important for me. At least all my memories of my childhood are in forests. And for the world, I think that the forests are very important because these are the sources of biodiversity. These are also the sinks of carbon, and these are the sources of water, as well as all life that are important for people's survival. It's very important for my culture because we have parts of the forest which we consider sacred, and that's where we do perform some of our rituals. And it's also where that's also the source of our identity, our communities, which are mostly forest. That's how we call ourselves. For instance, my community is Bisao. We are called Ibisao. That's the identity that we have. So it's very much related to our identities as well as our cultures and the practices, the relationships that we maintain between ourselves and nature. Well, I think there are 2 stories. The first story is that many of the world's remaining forests today are found in indigenous peoples' territories, which says that the natural resource management systems and the traditional knowledge of indigenous peoples in keeping their forests intact are still very much alive. The second story is that many of the world's forests are destroyed, and these are destroyed mainly because of extractive industries, of deforestation because of logging, and deforestation because of the expansion of agricultural plantations. So this is what is happening in many of the world's forests today, and this has to be stopped if we want the world to survive. Well, from what I have seen, the industries that really are causing a lot of deforestation, of course, is expansion of agricultural plantations, whether these are palm oil or even fast-growing trees, because they plant those to cut in a very short time. And of course, mineral extraction, which is mainly gold, copper, silver. And now increasingly oil and gas extraction. I just came from Ecuador. I did an official visit there, and I flew over the Amazon, and I saw oil rigs in the middle of the Amazon. So that means that oil extraction is also invading forest areas. Indigenous peoples face assassinations, criminalization. Trump-up charges are filed against them when they are protecting their forests. And of course, the grossest forms of impunity. People are getting tortured. Recently, I've had reports of even the Batwa, for instance, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, who are being tortured by forest guards, simply because they're protecting their forests, but they are accused as poachers. So these are the threats that indigenous peoples face. And of course, displacement, because of the development of so-called protected areas, some indigenous peoples get displaced from their own traditional territories, and these are usually the forests. Well, indeed, religious leaders, their faith usually says that they have to ensure the integrity of creation. And of course, creation means nature. And so I think that they should live, and use that philosophy, that faith, principle to help protect the forest. I think that religious leaders can convince their followers, their constituencies, to do what they should do to be able to protect the forest as well. I think the Laudato Si that the Pope has made is something that's very crucial to use as an awareness-raising tool, so that people will really understand that they are not separate from nature. They are part of nature, and it's their responsibility to protect nature as they protect themselves. I think the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is very important because it brings together different faiths, whether these are Christians or Muslims or Buddhists, but also indigenous peoples, mainly who are also who are animists. A lot of indigenous peoples are animists, and they are the ones. For me, I think when we talk of integral ecology, the best practitioners are indigenous peoples. So bringing all these different faiths together can be a powerful mechanism to strengthen the protection of rainforests and to ensure that the actors that are causing the deforestation will recognize the adverse impacts of what they are doing and to stop doing these kinds of actions. What gives me hope is that indigenous peoples are really willing to lay their lives on the line to be able to protect their forests, and they are strengthening themselves to be able to do that. But they're also reaching out to the broader society to make them more aware about their co-responsibility in protecting these forests and the natural ecosystems. For me, that's a source of hope, because if we have many, many communities who are doing that and are convinced that that's the track to take, then maybe there's hope that we will be able to save the forest and all the other parts of nature that are important for our very survival. Well, the increasing attacks against environmental rights defenders, but in my case, it's for indigenous peoples. Many of the environmental defenders are indigenous peoples, and what I think is happening is really something that the world should be concerned about, because if the defenders of the forests and natural ecosystems are being killed, then who is left to defend those things that are very important? I think that the role that the faith, the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative can play is several. First, of course, when people are being attacked and charges are filed against them, which are all trumped up, the faith communities should help them. They should help provide maybe legal support, because the indigenous peoples won't have any possibility to get to pay lawyers. They usually depend on pro bono lawyers who will not prioritize sometimes their cases. Secondly, they can also provide protection, in terms of sanctuaries. If these people are being displaced or they are being harassed and threatened, then they can hide them, and that's what the churches have been doing in the past. So I hope that continues. These communities of faith should continue to do that. And thirdly, of course, to advocate for the rights of these people and to really go and talk to the powerful players who are causing this, whether these are corporations or state authorities. They are the ones who have the possibility to reach out to them, and that's one role that they should play to be able to protect the defenders of nature. There are now several efforts to do mapping, and what these maps have shown is that there is an overlap between the better kept forests, the best kept forests in the world, and indigenous territories, especially territories where the rights of indigenous peoples are recognized. So there's a direct correlation between forests that are kept in a better state and the respect for the rights of indigenous peoples. So I think that those evidences will indeed show that indigenous peoples are the ones who are the stewards and custodians of this forest. But secondly, that their rights need to be recognized so that they will be able to continue doing this role. And then thirdly, that the ones who are violating this right should really be brought to justice, because this means destruction of communities as well as, of course, deaths of some individuals.
The Parliament of the World's Religions was present at the launch of the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative in the Nobel Peace Center in Oslo, Norway, on June 2017. In a first-of-its-kind summit, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, and Taoist religious leaders joined forces with indigenous peoples from Brazil, Colombia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, Mesoamerica, and Peru to make the protection of rainforests an ethical priority for the world's faith communities. The Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is an international, multi-faith alliance that aims to bring moral urgency and faith-based leadership to global efforts to end tropical deforestation. It is a platform for religious leaders and faith-based organizations to work hand in hand with indigenous peoples, governments, civil society, and businesses on actions that protect rainforests and safeguard those that serve as their guardians. The Interfaith Rainforest Initiative works globally and in major rainforest countries on the mobilization of faith-based leadership, advocacy, and on-the-ground action to protect rainforests. It works in Brazil, Colombia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, and Peru, which together contain more than 70% of the world's remaining tropical forests. Work in each country is focused on education and training, program development, communications and public outreach, faith-based mobilization, political advocacy, and connecting religious leaders with allies from across sectors to multiply their collective impact. I am grateful for this opportunity to share about our environment and to help raise awareness about the rapid acceleration of a mass extinction of numerous species that is taking place, that is caused by humans, that poses a huge risk to our own survival. We are eroding the capabilities of the planet to maintain human life and life in general which will reach a tipping point of no return that will unleash the failure of ecosystems, destabilize economies and governments, and trigger famine and refugee crises. In order to stem this crisis, there has to be an immediate halt to deforestation, a complete reform of the wildlife trade that will place sustainability over profits. A strong call was made to reduce human enterprise, especially its consumption demands on the biosphere, and to create tools for educating and activating the public about the unfolding mass extinction. The Interfaith Forest Initiative has created valuable tools to educate and activate the public and to help us know about the absolute necessity to protect our tropical forests. They have also clearly demonstrated the nexus between the pandemics that we are facing and our increasing incursions into these rainforests. The resource guide on rainforest protection for religious communities has 3 chapters that cover understanding the causes and consequences of tropical deforestation, the spiritual and moral imperatives to protect rainforests and their peoples. It provides 10 religious perspectives from the Baha'i, Buddhist, Christian, Confucian, Taoist, Hindu, Islamic, Jewish, Shinto, and Sikh perspectives. It sets forth distinct ways that religious communities can get involved. This is a resource guide that has a moral and spiritual foundation undergirding the information, which can be applied in secular and civil society as well. I highly recommend reading this resource guide and learn how you can get directly involved in protecting our rainforests. Soon, the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative will also be releasing this important document, Forests and Pandemics: How Protecting Tropical Forests Can Prevent Coronaviruses and Other Emerging Diseases, an issue primer for religious leaders and faith communities. It clearly establishes the fact that animal-to-human pathogenic transfers are increasing as we make incursions into the rainforests and come into contact with animals. Many viruses, such as Ebola, SARS, and the current COVID-19, have animal origins, and the more we consume and invade the natural habitat of these animals that live in forests, the more these pathogenic transfers to humans are taking place. The rainforests are therefore not remote to our lives, but their destruction have direct impact upon us. This current pandemic has had a profound impact on our economy, schools, social and working relationships. This primer sets forth the ways in which faith communities all around the world can step forward to raise awareness, demand that policymakers invest in people and nature rather than repeat unsustainable patterns, stress the forest and human health connection, advocate for forest protection as a disease prevention priority, and participate in forest restoration activities. Please go to the Parliament of the World's Religions as well as the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative websites for more detailed information. It is time that we change how we are living and wake up to the need to protect our rainforests and cease mismanaging our natural resources. The divine spirit is everywhere in creation, and we are being called to get back into right relationship with it, a relationship that is based upon respect for the environment. We must move from predation and destruction to preservation, restoration, and renewal of our environment. I want to also share about the Parliament of the World's Religions signature document. It's the Parliament's global ethic. The ethical principles set forth in this document comprise the foundation of the Parliament's work. There are 5 directives, which are nonviolence and respect for life, solidarity and a just economic order, tolerance and a life of truthfulness, equal rights and partnership between men and women, and sustainability and care for the earth. Since we are highlighting the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative today, I want to share in relevant part the important words contained in this 5th directive about sustainability and care for the earth. Historical experience demonstrates the following. Earth cannot be changed for the better unless we achieve a transformation in the consciousness of individuals and in public life. This transformation must also be achieved in the area of ethics and values. Every individual has intrinsic dignity and inalienable rights, and each also has an inescapable responsibility for what he or she does and does not do. All decisions and deeds, even our omissions and failures, have consequences. Keeping this sense of responsibility alive, deepening it, and passing it on to future generations is the special task of religions. We invite all men and women, whether religious or not, to do the same.
Despite some progress, instead of forests slowing climate change, which is what we want and what is possible, currently forest destruction is still driving climate change. Data from the Global Forest Watch report released just a few weeks ago show a loss in 2019 of precious tropical rainforests at a rate of a football field every 6 seconds throughout the entire year. Imagine that devastation. Brazil single-handedly accounted for over 1/3 of all rainforest loss in 2019. It is especially troubling that Brazil's administration proposed new legislation in February to allow commercial mining and oil extraction within indigenous territories, and have relaxed law enforcement efforts in the midst of the country's ongoing political, financial, and now COVID-19 crisis. Fortunately, we know what it will take to stop deforestation. It comes down to public policies. It's about laws and regulations, enforcement and finance. It requires strong government action supported by civil society and business. To give one example, although Brazil's deforestation rates are exploding now, this was not always the case. Between 2004 and 2012, Brazil actually succeeded in reducing large-scale deforestation in the Amazon by 75%. And they did this by doing 4 things. 1, by increasing law enforcement. 2, by expanding protected areas. 3, by recognizing indigenous territories. And 4, by applying incentives to slow conversion to agriculture. The dramatic reduction of forest loss happened at the same time that agricultural productivity increased, proving that we can protect forests while increasing food production. In Indonesia, increased law enforcement to prevent forest fires and land clearing, and the now permanent forest moratorium on clearing for palm oil plantations and logging helped slow deforestation. Finance, too, is key. Paying for reduced emissions from protected forests is a core part of the strategy, since international payments provide a political incentive as well as a financial one. Domestic agricultural subsidies that undermine forests must and can be modified to grow rural economies without forest loss. Globally, we also must remove perverse agricultural subsidies that damage forests. Increased transparency is also important. And now, remote sensing tools are helping communities and law enforcement around the world respond to illegal deforestation in near real time. So clearly, there are solutions out there, but they need to be scaled up in a number of countries. It is vital that we clear up a misconception. We do not need to choose between forests and food. It is a false choice. We have developed half of all vegetated land area on the planet, and most of it has been for agriculture. But the truth is that half the earth is enough. It is not a matter of claiming more land, but making better use of what we already have. We can produce the food the world needs, even to feed the expected 10 billion people by 2050, while staying within our planetary boundaries. To do so, we must transform the world's food system over the next decade, including encouraging a major shift in global diets to more plant-based food and reducing food waste. There is enough land for both production and protection, and we don't need to destroy one more hectare of tropical forest. So what can the viewers of this broadcast actually do to help protect tropical forests? The first thing is to make personal choices and take personal responsibility for the issue. Each of us can set a positive example in our lives through the food we eat and other consumer choices. Beef, soy, palm oil, and pulp and paper are together responsible for a huge share of deforestation globally. A shift toward a plant-based diet and eating less meat, particularly beef, is one of the most powerful and effective personal choices any of us can make in solidarity with rainforests. Reducing food waste is also important. Every bit of wasted food represents a squandering of the land and resources that produced it. 1/3 of all food grown worldwide is currently wasted. Consumers should also seek products made by companies committed to zero deforestation. A second approach is to understand that every economic decision constitutes a moral decision. Investor movements driven by people of faith and others can exert shareholder pressure on businesses by insisting that they adopt sustainable practices that respect forests. This is true whether for agribusiness or the other extractive industries which are driving deforestation. A third way is to get involved and support a wide range of charitable, activist, and educational groups working on these issues. And fourth is to raise awareness and impact public debate and policies on forests by leveraging our influence and authority everywhere we can, to share information and stand up and speak out, demanding a response from government officials. Ending deforestation comes down to mobilizing sufficient political will. Until now, globally and in major rainforest countries, the establishment and enforcement of laws around the forests has been insufficient to stop the destruction of these forests. We need government authorities at all levels to feel the pressure to adopt and implement the laws needed to protect forests. And that's where you and I hold the key to success. Pandemic recovery efforts can either protect forests or damage them further. Already we are seeing how, in the short term, the pandemic is leaving forests without enforcement, resulting in more illegal clearing and fires. In the medium term, economic declines and stimulus measures may also result in greater forest loss as countries attempt to stimulate their economies by propping up extractive industries. But there's another alternative in response to the pandemic. Governments can build back better. And here are a few suggestions. First, We can invest in the restoration and sound management of forests to create jobs, contribute to more sustainable economies, and protect the ecosystems our world needs. Second, we must not remove the environmental safeguards as we're currently seeing happening in the US and Brazil and other countries. Third, this is the time to accelerate the long overdue phasing out of fossil fuels in exchange for a resilient low-carbon economy. Fourth, bailouts for companies should require shifts to deforestation-free supply chains and other sustainability measures. And fifth, debt forgiveness could be tied to investment in restoration of forests and wetlands, and to fiscal policies that reward companies and local governments for conserving tropical forests, or to national level performance on reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, called REDD, R-E-D-D.
We hope you found today's program to be informative about the importance of rainforests and how you can step forward to help prevent its destruction and protect the natural habitat of indigenous people and the many species that call these rainforests home. My deepest appreciation to Dr. Jane Goodall, Dr. Charles McNeil, Ms. Victoria Towley Corpuz, and each and every one of you for joining us today.